welcome to the show. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com, and we are kicking it old school today. We had a good old-fashioned radio conflict, so we are not, obviously, if you see my background, you've become used to over the last couple of months, seeing the big Sports Radio WSBT banner in the background, and I've been in the radio studio, but there is a South Bend Cubs baseball game going on tonight because they were suspended in the fourth inning of their game last night, and it is starting at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and that means we couldn't do anything in the studio. So Jesse and I said, you know what? Let's just go back to our roots, and so that's where we are. We are on the good old YouTube channel, doing it live, and of course on the podcast platform as well, Irish Breakdown podcast platform. Salty Virginia Peanut says he welcomes the return, if only for a day, to the podcast-only format. Feels old school. I assume there will be no commercial breaks. That's right. No commercials, no mercy from this show tonight. How are you tonight, Jesse?
I'm doing pretty good. I just realized that this is my first show since the loss that occurred on Sunday evening.
I know.
I've been pretty... It's like a weird time in the year right now. You know, we're about to transition to fall. I don't know if that has, I've been feeling kind of crappy today between my head and stomach, but hoping I'll feel better. Also, legs feel like cinder blocks. I've been running a mile per day, so that hasn't been pretty fun.
Man,
I gotta run another mile this evening once we get done with this show.
Getting in the home stretch. 1 month from today is the big event. Today. I'm not talking about Notre Dame, Boise State. I'm talking about the nuptials, Jesse and Naomi.
Yep, officially 1 month away from our wedding. And to top it all off, our Dallas Cowboys are opening the NFL season this evening against the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's right. I kind of like the fact that they're 8.5-point underdogs and nobody.
I do too. I like this kind of underdog narrative, to be honest with you. And everyone I've talked to today, I said, definitely take the spread. I think 8.5 is really egregious for a season opener, especially for the Cowboys and Eagles. Anytime Dak and Jalen are both healthy, these games are really good games, close games, and I don't see it really being any different tonight. And
2 years ago, when the Eagles went to their first Super Bowl against the Chiefs, when Dak Prescott was healthy for both games, Super Bowl, NFC champion Eagles, they split their games. They were both close games as well. Last year, Cooper Rush was the quarterback for both Cowboys-Eagles games. I expect tonight. I don't expect tonight to be what everyone thinks just because there's no Micah Parsons. So
you got Kenny Clark in the middle. Trayvon Diggs, I think, is going to give it a go in the secondary. So that's really good news. I'm not being a homer when I say this. I think it's worth a sprinkle on Notre Dame, on the Cowboys at a plus 350 money line right now. I really think it's worth a little bit of $10-15 on that because, like I said, I definitely think they're covering, and I just don't be surprised, man. I think the Cowboys are really going to surprise a lot of people this year. I really don't think they're going to be as bad as many people think.
Pour some sugar on me, baby. Just sprinkle it right on there. Sprinkle it on that money line. That's a nice little money line. It's in Philly. That's the only thing that gives me pause about the money line. I like that. I like getting 8.5 points, though. I definitely like that. It is we in or we out day. We've got a lot of questions that have been submitted in the Champions Lounge from Irish Breakdown subscribers, including Salty Virginia Peanuts. Thank you for the reminder, sir. I already hit refresh right before the show started, and I saw the late breaking Salty Virginia Peanuts question that got in there. So that will be part of the show.
Question for you. What's the overall vibe been this week on this show coming off the loss? We got a lot of doomsdayers. Do we got a lot of optimism? Where are we kind of at right now?
It's one thing not to be on the show. It's another thing to just completely ignore the show for a couple of days.
The reason why I couldn't is
there was actually a reference to you at the end of the main segment a couple of days ago when we were talking about Jadarian Price getting benched, presumably for the fumble that he had late in the first half that CJ Carr had to dive on. I mean, most people are really upset with Joe Rudolph and not happy about the offensive line, not happy about specifically Anthony Knapp at left tackle. there are some other things mixed in there. The way Chris Ash called the defense, the defensive game plan that they had with all the soft zone coverage and stuff like that. So
you're crucified if you do, and you're crucified if you don't in regards to zone and man. I feel like, but I would say I think my biggest disappointment was the play of the trenches. I thought the offensive line was obviously sloppy. I think hand up, I underestimated what kind of team Miami put together through the portal. They were, brand new offensive line, a lot of additions on the defensive line. And I think what a lot of people have to realize is Carson Beck is still one of the top NFL quarterbacks, to be honest with you. Going into last season, he was number one on a lot of quarterback big boards, but, got hurt. Things didn't pan out in Georgia. And now he's with Miami. But, I honestly didn't mind the way the defense played. I think there's obviously some things to clean up, but I think that game was ultimately decided by the passiveness by the offense to start the game. And I told you this at halftime. I didn't think Notre Dame was going to win, and I thought it was going to come down to that stupid touchdown they let up right before halftime. But you look at Miami's stats. They had like 200 on the ground, 200 through the air, just about 100 on the ground. I mean, Notre Dame's stats were pretty similar too. So, I'm not trying to make excuses, but the rain, playing at Miami being a top 10 team, a legit team, there's worse things that could happen than losing by 3 on a last possession, I guess is what I'm getting at. And Adam, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you want Miami to win the ACC now.
Adam asks if that bad of line of scrimmage play can really be fixed without Joe Alt saving us again, like happened.
I think it's going to be huge getting Jagasol back, because I think you put Jagasol probably at left tackle and bump Knapp into a more natural position of playing guard. And you're going to have your best offensive lineman out there. There's just a lot of inexperience that showed, and in a group that has
not on the offensive line. There's a ton of experience on the offensive line. That's what's most disappointing about that.
Right.
You had 3 guys who started in the college football playoff semifinal last year against Penn State. Like that's an issue to me. But to Adam's question and to the point, I do think that to a large extent we underrated Miami. And the question now is going to be, was Miami really that good, or is Notre Dame's offensive line really that bad? I think that it is somewhere in the between, middle. But I do think that we didn't give Miami's defensive line especially enough credit.
Yeah.
But we also did think that, considering who they do have back, those 3 guys, Knapp, Schrouth, Emil Wagner, all started against Penn State in the semifinals last year. Plus, Ashton Craig would have been a starter if he hadn't been injured. He was out for the rest of the year after he got injured against Purdue. We expected more from the offensive line, but this is going to be the biggest question. Just how good does Miami turn out to be? And can that naturally raise Notre Dame's play now going forward? Because you're not facing that caliber, if it really turns out to be that caliber of a defensive line. I do think it is a good defensive line. I think Ruben Bain Jr. is a really good defensive end. That was mostly matched up against Emil Wagner on the other side. But yeah, Indy 72 said Jagasau is not coming back until sometime in October. This fire needs to be put out before then. Give Black a shot. I realize a lot of I'm just going to say this. From things that we've heard, the offensive line coach does not think that Anthony Knapp is as big an issue as most of the rest of us think. So it's a pipe dream if you think that Will Black is going to find his way into the starting lineup anytime soon.
Yeah, and to your point about Ruben Bain Jr., I've been seeing not a lot of, but I've seen a couple mock drafts, NFL mock drafts, and a lot of them have him kind of going in the top 10 already. A guy that has a lot of talent, kind of had a down year last year on a really bad defense, but if you look at his stats from years before, he's a really good pass rusher. And I think I saw something that said, he has one of the highest pressure rates ever in college football, second to Myles Garrett. And we all know how Myles Garrett was. So, I think the biggest thing that I overlooked was obviously the talent on Miami's team. But more importantly, there was still a lot of things that were coming together for Notre Dame. New defensive coordinator, how he would call the game, offensive line, an offensive line that hasn't played together as a unit, and then obviously, CJ Carr. So I think they spun their wheels a lot early. And to be honest with you, I'm not worried about the Texas A&M game, but I'm worried about the pressure and implications that are now on this game because you lost the first game to Miami. Obviously there was room to split between these games, but there's no room to go 0-2, in my opinion.
We've had our share of Miami fans this week. Haven't necessarily shown up at the live chat. Most of them like comments on the YouTube, afterwards. But Jose in the YouTube chat says, I'm a Hurricanes fan. Trust me, Cristobal got conservative. If you let Dawson keep attacking, it wouldn't have been close. I don't know. Like, did he really stay conservative once Notre Dame pulled within a touchdown of Miami? And then Notre Dame shut him down again. The 3 and outs came at the end as Notre Dame was getting into the game, getting closer into the game. So
did you see the clip that Cristobal didn't know that Notre Dame had a last timeout on their last run play on 3rd down before they kicked that field goal?
Well, it doesn't surprise me. And that's what, given the history of Mario Cristobal, I did think that maybe some kind of decision, something like that, could have come into play late in the game. Unfortunately for Notre Dame, that's not the way it unfolded, because they were playing catch up rather than, kind of a back and forth type thing. But I mean, look at the clock management to begin with. Miami had to burn timeouts way earlier than they wanted to in both halves.
Yeah, I think that was probably the one area that Notre Dame outperformed Miami was just operations, clock management, game management, that sort of stuff. But, obviously it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Miami won. I'm definitely, able to admit that. But I don't know. Just a lot of pressure early on. But, Notre Dame suffered that loss early in the season last year. I trust in Marcus Freeman and got to get things going. I will say, though, my least favorite part about being a Notre Dame fan and watching that game was just the amount of people who were blowing me up in the first quarter and the second quarter. And it's like, I have friends telling me, Notre Dame looks. Let me. I just want to read some of these real quick.
Boy, here we go.
It's just funny. It's just funny at the end of the day. Someone said, y'all might be horrible this year. CJ Carr, and I didn't want to respond until the game was over because I didn't want to get myself into something. But, talking about, this is my favorite one. You don't play anyone for sure good, so you won't be tested. But if USC or A&M have a D-line, you might be in trouble. And it's like, it's just, I love the overall ignorance of all these people who just, again, circle back to this Notre Dame doesn't play anyone narrative or that Notre Dame isn't tested by any means. Did you not watch the playoffs last season? They made it all the way to a national championship.
But again, that's what's so disappointing about their performance against Miami. They shouldn't have been pushed around the way they were. We can give Miami credit, for both of their lines, but Notre Dame just shouldn't have been pushed around the way they were against Miami after showing they could go toe-to-toe with the Georgias and Penn States of the world and Ohio State, obviously, as well. But I'm talking about, true big physical type linemen on both sides of the trenches. That's what was the most shocking. That's not taking anything away from Miami, but Notre Dame just shouldn't have looked that bad when it comes down to it. Yeah. Miami can be good, but Notre Dame should have been able to match that.
Oh,
they're the team that just went to the national championship game last year. Miami is still trying to prove itself.
And this is what leads me into my major. Thank you for bringing this up because this leads me into, I feel like, my main point or my main takeaway from the game. I was just so disappointed with how Notre Dame started that game because they didn't play with the confidence of a team that just played off a national championship.
Yeah.
You gotta, as they say, kind of gotta let the things hang. You come off a national championship, you've rebranded this program. And everything else, I just wish that they would have played like that. They just played too timid to start the game, and they dug themselves in a hole they couldn't get out of.
I don't get this comment. Sounds like we're really struggling to admit Miami won the game. Like, have you listened to this show at all this week? Like these are not excuses for Notre Dame.
Analysts.
These are critiques of Notre Dame and the way Notre Dame performed or didn't perform. They got beat. That's what we've said all week. James says Miami looked great. Yeah, and Notre Dame didn't. And again, Miami was the team that got beat by Syracuse at the end of last year to miss the opportunity to get into the college football playoff. Notre Dame was the team with a good chunk of guys back from a team that just played in the national championship game. Again, specific to the offensive line, Notre Dame was a team that went that far last year and showed that they could be more physical. And that's, to me, the biggest indictment of that game is the true lack of physicality on both sides of the line of scrimmage by Notre Dame. They got out-physicaled. And after watching them against Texas A&M last year, against, I think you can include Indiana in this mix because Indiana, was good at the line of scrimmage. They just didn't have the skill type players to be able to play with Notre Dame. Georgia and Penn State and Ohio State, after watching Notre Dame go toe-to-toe, physical battles against those teams last year, we all expected a lot more from Notre Dame against Miami Sunday night, but that's not what we got.
Agreed.
All right. See what you got us. You got us on like a...
Well, I just wanted to get it out there. I like to give my thoughts. Okay. I hadn't had the chance yet this week.
That's okay. Yeah, see, and Jose is saying he doesn't agree with Bernie as a Hurricanes fan. Appreciate a respectable fan who can jump in and have fun and mix it up and not just take cheap shots, but have fun doing it. Yeah, total, like, not being a troll kind of guy. All right, let's do some we in, we out questions. This one is from Free Man for Life. Was CJ Carr getting 3 TDs in his first game of the year against one of our toughest opponents? See, credit where credit is due. Are you in or out on Carr having 30-plus total touchdowns this year? How about 35-plus total touchdowns?
Yeah, I mean, right now he's on pace for 36. I think 30 is a bit rich because, a running back didn't get those rushing touchdowns. I don't expect CJ Carr to have a rushing touchdown every game. And side note, how about that, though? How about, Denbrock keeping the play out of the Riley Leonard playbook and running a lot of that QB power based on, and that's at the line of scrimmage read, which I really like because that allows CJ Carr to make that read on his own. And Denbrock has the confidence in him running that play. But, that's the good thing I think about CJ Carr is, yes, he's not overly fast, but he's still an athlete. He can still get you 8 to 10 yards on a QB power if you need him to. But if I'm being honest, he took a couple shots, and I don't know if I need to see CJ Carr take those kind of shots the entire season. So, back to the original question, I think he'll be right around 3 passing touchdowns a game. Don't think we can bank on the rushing side of things, but for the fun of it and knowing kind of some of these crappier teams that they'll play throughout the season, I'll say he'll get 30-plus.
Yeah, I'm in on 30-plus. 35 is stretching it. That would be the upper limit. I think between 30 and 35 is a pretty comfortable number. When you look at him having the kind of game that he had in his debut and the fact that he had to do most of it, under duress, obviously, because of the kind of pressure that he was getting, both from Bain and up the middle and everywhere else, and the fact that he had to do it in comeback fashion, and he wasn't just slinging it all over the place while leading that comeback either. So I think if he can have that kind of game in game number 1, I think 30-plus is very reasonable. So I will be in on that. I'll be out on 35-plus. Fred G. Sanford says we sound like Notre Dame homers on steroids. The entire neutral college football world thought we got manhandled because we did. We started like that because Miami forced us to. Okay, great. Great point. Again, have you listened at all this week?
I think the number one thing you said.
Did you listen to any of what we just said? We said that they got out physical. Like, what part of that do you not understand? Do you speak English, Fred? Like, do they speak that wherever you're from? Go ahead, Jess.
No, I was just getting ready to say, I think the number one thing that we said we were disappointed in was how the defensive and offensive line got manhandled. And you're not going to win many games by doing that.
Correct. Domer Grizz, the running backs got limited touches against Miami. There's a danger that they will press in the next game and try to do too much with their limited opportunities. For example, Love trying to hurdle defenders on every play, or Price looking to bounce for a home run when getting 4 is all we need in that moment. This is a concern going into Texas A&M. Are we in or we out?
Sorry, I'm just kind of reading part of this question over again.
So the basic question is, do the running backs press after getting limited touches in the Miami game? Do they press against Texas A&M?
I don't think they press against Texas A&M, but you got to also realize, who did Texas A&M play in their first game? Like UTSA or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that box
Gave up
score.
a 75-yard touchdown run to UTSA as well.
And that was what I was getting ready to say is I believe UTSA had a combined around 200 rushing yards and a big 75 run, like you said. I don't think they're going to be pressing. I think the game plan is going to be getting the ball in the hands of the running back more, and allowing CJ Carr to play off the play action game. So, a lot of people were, bringing up the fact that Jeremiah Love was hurdling here and there and everywhere. Just let the guy be an athlete, I'm not going to critique the chef.
I do think maybe, like, when you start to see some of that, it is maybe a little bit of frustration. Like, he feels like he's got to hit a home run, every time that he touches the ball, when, again, 4 yards will do. Just keep the chains moving forward. But that happens when you get limited touches. I think that the key is getting him involved in the game early in the game. Like, that is the biggest thing for Jeremiah Love against Texas A&M, after having just 10 touches running the ball and 4 more on receptions. So I'm out that he'll try to do too much, but I do think that it is, getting him involved in the game plan early on is something that they've got to do, again, because, like, that's something that we expected they would do against Miami, but they obviously never made him a big part of their game plan, and he's literally one of the best players in college football.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. So it's hard to get Jeremiah Love going when you're having, 3 and outs, 4 and outs, 5 and outs type situations, and then you're in a hole. Because when you're in a hole, down 2 scores on the road in that kind of environment, there's really not as much time to establish that run game. And so I think that's where I was a little bit frustrated, is I would have liked to see more balance in the script early on. I think they opened the game with like 3 straight passes, if I'm not mistaken. I just didn't love that. And I would have preferred a better opening script. But who am I? Mike Denbrock has, coached a Heisman and all those things. So he ultimately probably knows better than I do, but I would have liked a better effort early on to start the run game.
I agree. Another one from Domer Grizz. As much as the team needs the bye week to get right after Miami, you'd rather they play this weekend to get rid of that awful taste more quickly. We in or we out on that?
I'm out on that. I really don't care when they play, if it's 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if there's a bye in between or no bye. I heard, you heard Marcus Freeman talk after the game and address the team. I think whether they had 1 week to prep or 2 weeks to prep, they know where their faults lied, and they're going to get after it. But at the end, I feel better about having 2 weeks, because that gives you more time to analyze film and really correct the things that you want, going into the Texas A&M game.
Yeah, I would be in on what Domer Grizz is saying. I would rather just, go right into it, especially since it's one game, like, lick your wounds for a day or 24-hour rule, whatever, and then just get right at it and go attack the next opponent. But the other side of that, like, you get your bye, you do have the extra time to prepare to work on and assess whatever issues that you think you have. So but I would rather just not have a week off and go right into the second game, personally.
Yeah, it makes the loss sting much longer.
Yeah. Kind of lingering, hold on to it that much longer, that kind of thing. From Joe Allen, Marcus Freeman had a come to Jesus moment with Chris Ash, and the defense will be more aggressive against Texas A&M. Are we in? Are we out? I will be out because I don't think he had a come to Jesus moment. I'm sure they sat down and looked at game plan and and looked at what worked and what didn't work. I don't think this is anything. Again, like Vince has said this week, it's not like Marcus Freeman went into that game and the first time he knew what Chris Ash's game plan was when he was standing on the sideline down there at a Hard Rock Stadium. Like Marcus Freeman is in all these meetings during the week. He knew what the game plan was going to be. It just did not work nearly the way they thought it would. And I think that hopefully you get a head coach, who can talk with his new defensive coordinator and say, look, we don't maybe need as much zone coverage. We can play more man. We can be physical with these guys, up at the line of scrimmage and take our chances that way. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I'm I think the coming to Jesus moment is a bit dramatic, but I am in on them being more aggressive against Texas A&M. I think Notre Dame needs to err on the side of being a man-to-man team and really only play zone, situationally. I think the zone really wasn't ideal against Beck because he could sit back there and really pick you apart. And we all know that Beck is not nearly as good of a quarterback under pressure. And so when you talk about, creating pressure with five guys or maybe even six guys, I think that naturally means you're playing more man on the backside. And obviously that was a big issue for Notre Dame. They just didn't get enough pressure on Beck. But to be honest with you, I think we need to see more KVA. I think he's going to be a guy who can create a lot of pressure off the edge, and then obviously playing at the linebacker position and coming on design stunts. That the guy, him and Jay Nosberry, I just feel like are guys that just have a nose for the ball. Like they just end up around the ball no matter what. And so, I think that we're going to see more, legit design pressures, not bringing as much 4-man pressures. And again, when you bring 5-6 guys, you're likely going to be playing more man on the backside.
I think you have to, and it can't just be, like I used to have fun with the defensive coordinator of our friend Vince D'Addario back in your playing days, that like most of the blitzes were just generic linebacker blitzes, through the A gap or through the B gap, and you guess wrong. And, that's, you've got a big play going the other way. Now we didn't see big plays going the other way, but most of the blitzes that we saw the other night, when they did try to bring extra pressure, were just that. There was really nothing creative. There were no corner blitzes or safety blitzes or, any of that kind of thing. They've just got to find a way to get more heat dialed up. Now, all that said, next week's opponent, Texas A&M, you're going to have a completely different kind of quarterback. Marcel Reed is not a pocket passer like Carson Beck. Beck is the perfect guy you want to bring some pressures on because he's a pocket guy. He's not going to take off running. With Marcel Reed, your biggest goal is just containing him and keeping him in the pocket long enough that the pocket ultimately collapses on him and you're able to bring him down, because he's a guy who can take off running and beat you with his legs. So it's a completely different kind of guy, and you will expect that it's going to be a completely different kind of game plan up front. Another one from Joe. Marcus Freeman had even Our Lady of Victory can't save you talk with Joe Rudolph about readjusting player personnel on the O-line. Are we in or are we out? I'll let you take this one first.
I think I'm definitely going to be out on that. I don't think it's necessarily an issue of personnel. There's studs all over the offensive line. I just think, to be honest with you, I saw a lot of technique errors from some of these guys. And I just think that this week and next week, now that you've got 2 weeks now, is a really good, coaching point to coach up some of these technique issues. And, I think that what a lot of people are kind of, over exaggerating is Notre Dame had to play a top 10 opponent on the road week 1. Most teams get the luxury of kind of settling getting
to play UT San Antonio,
right? Getting to play an FBS, D1 AA school, or maybe even a MAC school, or whatever. And that's by design. You want to ease your way into it, but as we know for Notre Dame, they have this kind of tradition of starting off some of their biggest games, the opening game of the season. And so, while it maybe sounds like an excuse because they did play better against Texas A&M last year, I think Miami was a better team than Texas A&M was last year. And then there's more, NFL talent on this Miami team. So, yes, while I think there was a lot of errors on the offensive line part, you got to look at what was across from them. And, again, first game, your first live opponents outside of training camp. Yes, it wasn't great, but there's still a lot to work on.
Look, somebody said this earlier in the chat. You would think that Notre Dame lost to Miami, Ohio, and not Miami, Florida, because again, this was a top 10 team. And Joe, I get it. Everyone is worked up about the performance. But as Jesse said, it is one game and it was a top 10 opponent. Clemson's a team
on the road in the rain.
Yeah, Clemson's a team a lot of people were picking to win a national championship. Personally, I think Clemson's got a little bit, and I'm not trying to take anything away from LSU. LSU went on the road and they won that game. But personally, I think Clemson's got a little bit more issues because they have a much more veteran quarterback in Klubnik. And overall, I don't think their skill talent is as good as what Notre Dame's is either. It's also not as good as what Miami's is, So, like, there were multiple top 10 teams that played each other last week. 3 of them came away with losses. And now they've all and they were all teams that people are picking for the college football playoff at the beginning of the season. I just so much of this is like fan emotion dealing with this. And I get it because you're invested in the team. It's like you watch these shows and you listen to these shows all year long. Like you're invested in the team. So I get the attachment, but Marcus Freeman as a head coach can't react with emotion to any of this. He has to separate the emotion and look at this from a factual standpoint. What did we do wrong? How do we need to fix it? Can we get it fixed in a turnaround of 2 weeks for the next opponent? And then, oh, by the way, how does it also look different because every opponent presents a different set of challenges? So we all know that things were far from perfect, but I just Marcus Freeman is not reacting in the same emotional kind of way that a lot of fans react to this because, part of the reason you react with emotion is because the result is out of your control, it is completely out of your control. And you're watching from that aspect where as a player and a coach, you obviously have some control over the result of the whole thing. And again, they have to remove that emotional side and go about this in a factual way, figure out how they attack it, how they're going to get it better ultimately.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what you're saying, it's not a time to overhaul; it's a time to diagnose and fix. Let's not overreact here. A lot of people are coming into the chat and following up and saying, do you really believe that Anthony Knapp is a left tackle or the left tackle of the future? No, I don't. But what they have right now, I think he is, the best option for left tackle. And again, everyone thinks that there's an attachment to Joe Rudolph and Anthony Knapp. Everything still filters through Marcus Freeman. If Marcus Freeman was not comfortable with this offensive line, it wouldn't be the offensive line running out there.
Yeah, I mean,
do I think that Anthony Knapp is an NFL tackle? No, I think he's an NFL guard. But right now, he needs to play tackle for what this offensive line needs. And when Charles Jagasaw gets back, I think you can reevaluate.
Yeah, none of us think that Anthony Knapp is the tackle of the future. But again, the question is, you've only got one game. Everyone's acting like because of one game, they're just going to gut this offensive line and make these sweeping changes across the line. And that's just not going to happen. The question is, can he be better? Can they as a unit be better in game 2? And then can they start piggybacking on that?
It's just, can you diagnose and then can you fix the problem?
Yeah. And I agree with Joe. I don't think that, especially in the short term, I don't think that Rudolph is going to reevaluate. But if this becomes a recurring problem over the next however many games, it's going to be a month and a half, 2 months before you get Jagasaw back, what will the season be at that point? I don't know, but like if they're beating the teams that they're supposed to beat and you're still having problems on the offensive line, Jagasaw becomes an answer somewhere. He's going to find his way someplace back on the offensive line if there are issues, especially if it's at a particular position. He's going to find his way to that position. One more from Joe. The offensive play calling will be adjusted so that RPO will be a little more restricted to the sense that the ball needs to be ran more to make the scheme more effective. Are we in or are we out on that?
Yeah, I'll be in on this. And I think what this question is directly referencing is the interception that Carr threw on the tunnel screen. He said after the game that it was his read, and the read was either hand the ball off or throw the tunnel screen, and he decided to throw the tunnel screen. And obviously we saw what happened. And so part of that is on Mike Denbrock to say, okay, I'm going to take the decision out of my young quarterback and just call a straight up run play, and I think we will see a little bit more of that and I'm not really ultimately mad with the decisions that CJ Carr made. I think he was actually pretty good in his decision making. It's not like he threw an egregious interception over the middle of the field and the coverage completely, tricked him. The ball was like triple tipped on a screen and got intercepted. So, and the other turnover was a pass that he actually completed to Malachi Fields that he fumbled. So I'm not upset with CJ Carr's decision making, but I do think that Denbrock can call plays that take a little bit of the decision out of it.
Exactly. And you still want there to be RPOs because
you want to read the box.
Yeah, you want to read the box, you want to take advantage of what the defense is giving you. That's what you need. Now, like it wasn't just that they were RPOs against Miami, it's that a great deal of them, like the pass option was a screen most of the time. I think that, we'd like to see this passing game get a little bit more downfield. But again, part of that, what Notre Dame was able to watch on film as they broke down Miami going into the game, they knew Miami was going to have a good defensive front. They knew that they were going to have good defensive ends that could pose an issue, especially to a young quarterback, and pose an issue to Notre Dame's offensive line. So a lot of that had to do with that, getting the ball out quickly, trying to get CJ Carr in a rhythm. But as I've said a couple of times this week, you do have to, when you have that offensive line and you have Love and Price, you do have to call some set run plays. And you also, with the helmet communications that allow Mike Denbrock to talk to CJ Carr till there's 15 seconds on the play clock, you can get those guys at the line of scrimmage, see how the defense is set up. And then, Denbrock just has to say something into CJ Carr's ear in terms of what he wants him to call, whether it's a run or a pass and, where he wants it to go. So, I mean, there are ways around it rather than just leaving it all on a redshirt freshman quarterback's shoulders, even though he proved that he did make good decisions and good reads most of the night.
I mean, he went, if you're looking purely on stats, and I know that's not, everyone's favorite, but I mean, I honestly think that him and Beck's gameplay were pretty similar. And one guy's a sixth-year quarterback, fifth-year quarterback, graduate quarterback. And the other guy's making his first career start. So there's a lot to be optimistic about.
CJ Carr, in his first career start as a redshirt freshman, played a lot better than a lot of other more experienced quarterbacks around the country last weekend against better competition than most of those guys played against. So there's still a lot to be excited about. Are there issues? Yes. And guess what? We've been talking about them in hopefully a non-homer way. ND Forever 72. We in and we out. If Notre Dame loses to A&M and runs the table at 10-2, they still get in the playoffs. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I actually was laying in bed the other night and thought about this exact question. I'm not joking you. I really did.
Kept you up at night, huh?
No, it did, because I was like, if they go 0-2, because that's obviously on the table, and then win 10 straight, the exact narrative will be, well, Notre Dame lost the games against really good teams and beat everyone else that they were supposed to. And then they would say, well, it's a weak schedule and da-da-da-da-da. I honestly think if they go 10-2, it's 50-50, maybe 60-40 chance that they get in. So, at the end of the day, you got to do your job and take care of business. And what makes it even tougher is obviously there's an infatuation with conferences, and how many conferences are getting spots into the playoffs and how many actual at-large bids there are. There's not that many at-large bids, so we know that Notre Dame has to do as much as possible. And going 10-2 and those 2 losses being against the most quality opponents on your schedule, it'll be tough. But you could obviously make an argument, well, it was early on in the season and this team has, improved drastically since then. But I don't like putting that into the fate of the committee.
Roger Dodger says 10-2 is likely out. Spoken like a USC fan, my friend. Our old friend Roger Dodger, who shows up every now and then. BL3 says if they lose the first 2 and run the table, maybe at best they're an 11th seed. And that's where I agree. Like, if you lose those first 2 and you've got to win 10 in a row to get in, it's like, who have you beaten along the way? We'll wait and see who USC turns out to be. Maybe one or 2 of these other ACC teams end up being ranked by the middle of the season when Notre Dame plays them. That always kind of happens. Like, there's going to be a team or 2 that's unexpected, that's a little bit better than you think. And they're, just like the other side, there's always teams that end up worse than maybe what you think. I just think like if you look at it logically, Alabama was ranked number 8 last week, and they lost to an unranked Florida State team. Now, granted, they got beaten down by an unranked Florida State team, but they lost to an unranked Florida State team, and they fell 13 spots in the polls. So if Texas A&M is not ranked right now, and this is a Notre Dame home game, and again, Alabama lost on the road to that unranked team and fell 13 spots. So I think that's probably going to be about the place that Notre Dame is going to end up in. They're going to fall somewhere. They're going to be 0-2. They're going to fall somewhere into the 20s. And now, if you run the table, they're going to work their way back up the ladder. But what's going to happen is once you get to the end of the season, if you're sitting there at 10-2, you're going to be compared against all these 2-3 loss SEC and Big Ten teams.
Right. And that's what I was trying to get at.
Right. And then it's going to be, okay, who actually beat somebody good? Who did you beat? Who did you lose to? In Notre Dame's case, obviously, it would be at least one pretty good team, you think, in Miami. Again, we'd have to wait and see what Texas A&M turns out to be. But you're going to be compared with those kind of teams. And everyone's going to be talking about, well, Notre Dame lost to the only 2 good teams that they played. So I've got to be out on them making it in as a 10-2 team. Way in and way out, we will see a new left tackle against A&M, or at least somebody else rotated in every third series or so, like Will Black. Again,
this
I know.
Is a big fat out. Knapp is the starting left tackle.
Yeah, it's not happening this week. Again, like if it becomes a thing going forward, maybe it happens. Maybe somebody forces Joe Rudolph's hand, but they're not going to react nearly that quickly. So that's this has been a hot button all week long, Jesse. Sean Kelly, we in or we out on Joe Rudolph?
I'm in on Joe Rudolph. They were in the national championship last year and had one of the best running attacks in the country.
I've been mostly in on Joe Rudolph because, again, I think that with the situation Notre Dame faced last year with Jagasaw out, the options you had two options that were bad and worse in terms of left tackle last year, and they started a true freshman. Started him on the road against Texas A&M. They won. He had his ups and downs. By the time Billy Schrouth came back, played left tackle. The left side of the offensive line got better. They ran the ball even more consistently with Billy Schrouth. I don't think that Joe Rudolph was fully in on Billy Schrouth playing left guard last year. And, maybe it turned out that way, not because maybe Joe Rudolph wanted it to be that way. And what we're seeing right now, the more I hear about what's going on at left tackle, I am falling farther out on Joe Rudolph. So maybe I was 6 or 7 out of 10 on Rudolph before. I would say I'm down to about a 3 or a 4 right now. And I'm not saying that a change has to be made in game 2 for me to feel any better, but the play, especially of the left tackle, has to greatly improve. Greatly improve to justify him being over there in front of some of the other guys who are not over there right now, whether that's Will Black or anyone else. So that's where I am. Ballpeen Shillelagh. Everything in me wants to post a we in or we out on the O line, but I think we've all had plenty of that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ballpeen. We in or we out. The Miami game will have the receiver room lit up, and both blocking and catching will be improved at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, I thought a lot of the catching woes were actually Eli Raridan. I think he had at least 2-3 drops. I think this question I think can imply to the whole team. I think the whole team, the wide receiver room, everyone's going to be lit up. You played bad. You kind of got embarrassed. And I think what I saw that sums it up the best is Notre Dame got beat in a style in which they beat everyone else.
Right.
Lack of turnovers, imposing their will, yada, yada, yada. Notre Dame didn't do that, and Miami did. And I think that'll have everyone else, the entire team and the wide receivers lit up. And I think we are going to see, better catching and all that stuff. But I will say I am not a fan of in the goal line using Will Pauling and Malachi Fields as blockers on the edge. Let's get in double tight. Let's get underneath center and hand the freaking ball off.
I don't mind that. There were some questionable decisions in terms of when you're going to start running CJ Carr as an example. Like 3rd and 1. Could you maybe just run your All-American running back Jeremiah Love instead of the quarterback? But I do think I think that the receivers are going to come with a chip on their shoulder. I do think that the secondary they faced last week is better than the one they're going to see next week. And so, yeah, I'll be in on that they'll have more receptions, the receivers will, than they did in the Miami game. BL3 says, what happened to the 5-star Cam Williams? How come he can't get on the field? He's not good enough yet. If he was more consistent right now, he'd be on the field. Like everything that we've seen says that he's not good enough
these guys
yet.
show up for practice every day. Clearly, He's not doing enough in practice to get on the field.
Yes, correct. And that's not a knock on Cam Williams. He's like the reason you make the 2 or 3 deep depth chart, whatever your position is because you're better than the other guys. And he's not better than enough of the other guys yet. That's why he's not on the field yet. That's just where it's at. In or out, CJ's scramble play, as nervous as it may have made you, gave shades of Ian Book, albeit with a better arm talent and seemingly better ball placement and risk taking.
All I could think about during CJ scramble play is if our man Chris Collinsworth was calling this game and Patrick Mahomes was quarterback. Because if Patrick Mahomes replicated that exact play that CJ Carr did, rolling out, swiveling the hips, eluding a defender, the no-look pass, just imagine how goo-goo gaga everyone, including Chris Collinsworth, would have been if Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback during that play. I think we have a lot to be excited about, and I think it's a disgrace to CJ Carr because he's going to be more mobile and more arm talented than Ian Book was.
Yeah, it was less shades of Ian Book. Although there was, we saw Ian Book. Trying to remember which games it were, like maybe Virginia Tech a few years, but where he made, he had some moves where he's kind of dodging and ducking and getting away from defenders himself. Like to me, it was like the first guy I thought of was Brett Favre, and then my guy Romo was in there as well. He used to make those kind of moves, like eyes in the back of your head kind of moves. And obviously Carr made 3 of them, retreated, all the way back to the 29-yard line and then finished it off with a no-look pass. So like, to me, it is like no shade on Ian Book. It is much more like Favre Romo type stuff. A little Matt Stafford thrown in there as well, more so than Ian Book. But, again, we saw Book make those kind of things. So, misguided passion. The post-game press conference was bad. Coach Marcus Freeman ignored the question about the middle eight and looked like he was making excuses for the O-line. Doesn't have to throw the players under the bus, but he should at least acknowledge that the coaches and team did not play up to the standard, or that Miami was the better team. Are we in or are we out on that?
I'm out on this. I think from that clip that we saw from Marcus, okay, it's one thing to address your team, and it's one thing to address the media. I saw the clip of him after the game talking to the team in the locker room and talking about, there were deficiencies and we do need to be better. And he did acknowledge that. There's no reason to single one person out. They're a collective team. And then when you get to the media portion of it, again, there's no reason to bring your hammer down on your team publicly, because that's going to get back to your team. He's going to have plenty of conversations with his team privately without the media being there. And so
that's exactly right.
I thought he handled it perfectly. I know that Marcus Freeman was mad, and I know that he knows that they didn't play well, and that they, that there's a certain standard and they weren't close to it. And he'll have those conversations with the team. But when you're talking to the media, you don't bring that kind of energy, because it's going to get back to the locker room, and then the resentment's going to grow.
I just want to clarify, because Jim is saying that Freeman said he thought the line played well. It wasn't that he thought they played well. He thought they played with great effort, is what he said. That was the first thing that he talked about. And I think we're past, the ribbons of playing with great effort once you've played in a national championship game. And that's just it. Like, all of this analysis that we've had of Notre Dame and what they did or didn't do at the line of scrimmage is all based on, we just saw the pinnacle, like what this team is capable of last year, playing physical football and getting to a national championship game. He doesn't need to air everybody out in a post-game press conference, because the opposite of what he did is Brian Kelly. Let's just be honest, who never had a problem throwing anyone under the bus when he stood at the podium in the post-game press conference. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about before. Marcus Freeman adeptly removes the emotion, like you didn't see him up there turning different colors and, venting and pounding his fists and, yelling and having little tirades and stuff like that. Like, that's not who he is. That's who Brian Kelly is. There's much more of that from Brian Kelly, obviously, with the emotion. So I'm glad he didn't air anybody out there. I will be curious to see what he says next week when we get a chance to talk to him at his next press conference, in terms of how he's evaluated some of this stuff and what it looks like. Again, he's never going to throw any player under the bus and critique them in that way with a microphone and or a camera in his face. But I will be curious to see what he says about adjustments next week.
I thought he handled things better than Dabo, who said LSU didn't play well, but LSU still beat Clemson. Like, Come on now. What are we doing?
Right.
That's an all-time low for Dabo, in my opinion. Like, just take your L and go home, Like, I thought that was really bad on Dabo's part.
At least have a little humility. Yes. Jim Halloran, we in and we out. Neither Love nor Price rushed for over 100 yards against Texas A&M. I'm going to be out on this. Price nearly had 100 last year. He had a little over 90, I think, last year against A&M. I think that one of these guys is going to hit the century mark, and I will call my shot right now and say it will be Jeremiah Love against the Aggies.
Yeah, I think, looking like we talked about earlier in the show, UTSA gave up a 75-yarder and over 200 yards combined on the ground. I think that one of these guys is going to get over 100 yards this week, and I think there's going to be more of an intent to make sure it happens. So I'll be in.
Yeah. Salty Virginia Peanuts. The Irish passing game cannot afford to neglect the slot receiver position and short to intermediate depth targets in the middle of the field if it wishes to realize a fully balanced and effective aerial attack.
Yeah, I'll be in on this.
Hold on. As a corollary, any game in which the great one is targeted poorly, he says, 3 times should be intermediate cause for separate track congressional and papal investigations. Jesse, go ahead.
So I'll be in on this. I do think that there was obviously a a little bit of a concerted effort to not work the middle of the field, and that obviously comes from your slot position. But they didn't want CJ Carr to make a bad pass over the middle of the field early on, and that's understandable. But obviously, as the season progresses, you have to be able to work the middle of the field to be an effective, well-balanced offense. So, while Greathouse was the short end of the stick on that, I do think that CJ Carr is more comfortable throwing that ball towards the boundaries. So you think about thirds of the field, you got boundary as 1/3, middle of the field as 1/3, and the other boundary as the other third. I think that he prefers those outside 2/3 just based off of that kind of back shoulder fade ball that we've been talking about, and why Malachi Fields is going to be so effective. I think it's going to take time for him to build up the confidence, the courage to be able to throw that ball over the middle of the field, but it will come, and it'll come by working, outside in, essentially. I think towards the end of the season, middle of the season, we'll see him working that middle of the field, because I think Greathouse will be a great option over the middle of the field, and obviously Raritan will be really good down the seam at some point.
I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the passes were outside and not to the middle of the field.
Right.
Like when you talk about, the kind of camp that CJ Carr had, said this last week, like the stuff that we actually saw was more deep middle of the field. But I don't think it's a coincidence that they avoided the middle of the field as much as possible. Now, again, at some point, you have to get to the place where he's comfortable doing it, and Mike Denbrock is comfortable, calling those kind of plays, because you can't just neglect that part of the field. Although in today's game, a lot of teams do. They don't, go to the middle of the field at all unless it's a deep post. But yeah, I mean, I understand what Salty is saying with his Jaden Greathouse agenda that he's got working there. But
Salty reminds me of this guy that is on my staff at work, younger engineer by position, but is actually older than me. I guess you could say in real life. The guy speaks like with these massive words and big long sentences, but when you get down to it, he's really not that smart of a guy.
Oh, he's just trying to wow you a little.
He's
so
just trying to mask it
trying to
bit.
Impress us all. Like
I think he's trying to impress us all.
Okay.
I do.
Okay, I got you. Mr. Math calling out Salty's vocabulary. Okay.
Just good fun. He told me my haircut sucks. So.
No, that's true. Jesse, it's rapid fire time.
Let's fire away.
All right. Good we in, we out questions on the show tonight. Rapid fire begins. Fill in the blank. The thing that makes you the most confident that Notre Dame is a playoff team is blank.
The thing that makes me most confident that Notre Dame is a playoff team is watching CJ Carr play, to be honest with you. My biggest concern at the beginning of the season was whether or not CJ Carr could be mature enough, handle, running an offense with the lack of, I guess, experience. I think the defense will naturally figure itself out. And I think that, the offensive line, while it has work to do, it'll figure itself out. But the thing that makes me most confident is the biggest question mark coming into the season was the quarterback position. And I thought we saw enough out of CJ Carr to say this guy can lead a playoff team.
All right. I like that. That's a good answer. Mine starts with Marcus Freeman because he's been here before. He's responded from these kind of situations before. Let's face it, losing to Northern Illinois at home is much worse than losing to a number 10 team on the road in a season opener. And they went from NIU to a national championship game. Freeman has shown the ability to be nimble, reflective, make the changes that he needs to make midstream and get things corrected. And, also worth noting that on top of the 10 teams that lost, or the top 10 teams rather, that lost last weekend, piggybacking on your point, I think you make a great point about CJ Carr and his performance, because a lot of people feel really good about watching CJ Carr last week. Not a lot of freshmen, red shirt or not, can go on the road against the top 10 team and lead a comeback from 2 touchdowns down in the fourth quarter to get the score tied. Like that was a big moment for CJ Carr. So
the moment never looked too big for CJ Carr.
Yeah, exactly. And the moment also doesn't look too big for Marcus Freeman. And so when you have the head coach, that's been there, done that, and you have this young quarterback who's also shown, that he is wise beyond his years, I think that those are two really good things, So Notre Dame's got a few things to figure out. We'll see if they're able to do it, but I have confidence that they can because Marcus Freeman has shown in the past that he can do it, like in a span of weeks, just like he has right now. Like he doesn't have to turn around in 1 week and play the next game. He's got 2 weeks to prepare now. So that's why I've got the confidence, because they've got him at the top of the food chain. By the way, Jesse, this one is for you from Brian. He says fullback moved to linebacker for a reason. Now, technically, Jesse was always a linebacker.
Well, how did this even come up? Did this come up earlier in the week or something? What's going on here?
So Vince is not happy. We're assuming that Jadarian Price didn't see the ball again after the fumble that CJ Carr had to dive on. And, the assumption is, look, J1 Sider, the running back coach, has a standard. If you're going to fumble, if you're not going to take care of the football, you're going to stand on the sideline. Vince doesn't like that. He says, like that you got to get the running back on the field. And so what I said was, well, you had no problem with a position coach benching a fullback for an entire season.
And in my career as a running back.
That's right. He had no problem with that, but when the shoe is on the other foot, he wants J1 Sider to reverse courses and, just walk away from his standards.
Well,
mid-game.
Not only is it a fumble, but it's an inside the 5-yard line fumble. There is no more crucial play than fumbling inside the red zone with the ball on the 1-yard line. They're lucky that, again, CJ Carr is just really a gamer and had the awareness to jump on that ball, or it would have been a catastrophe. It is common knowledge, no matter what level you're at, especially in the college or NFL, you fumble, and in today's running back world where you have a lot of 1-2 punches, you're going to sit out a little bit. Ball security is the number one priority as a running back.
Yep.
And so, I get it. Jadarian Price was doing his thing, but I'm pretty sure Jeremiah Love has come out before last season when he fumbled the ball. It happens, And again, it was so crucial with where they were at on the field during that fumble.
Yeah. You're in the red zone. You're getting ready to score. You're very fortunate that Carr was able to fall on the ball and, do what he was able to do, by throwing the athleticism that he showed with that touchdown pass that we already talked about. And I know Brian was joking, but we're kind of playing around with it.
No, I know it's all good fun.
But I have no problem. A running back coach is going to prioritize ball security, and if that's his standard, that's his standard, and you don't break away from it just because you happen to be down. That's the price that you've got to pay. You're letting your team down, and now you've got to pay the price. I don't care if it's raining or not. It was raining for everybody else as well.
It was raining the night I fumbled.
Yeah.
Listen, they're deep at running back. You with that much talent. Those mistakes cannot happen.
Yes. Miami defensive end Ruben Bain was named the Lott Trophy National Impact Player of the Week for his play in Sunday's win over Notre Dame. Does it change the way you look at Notre Dame's offensive line performance after Bain got this award this week?
Yeah, not only that, but like I said earlier in the show when I was referencing, I've seen some mock drafts that have this guy going in the top 10. It doesn't make me look at them any different because they've gone against elite pass rushers last season, especially Knapp and Wagner going against Abdul Carter, some of those studs from Texas A&M, some of those studs for Ohio State, Georgia. They've played against elite defensive line competition. I'm more worried about the technique errors that I saw with, and I'm not some, offensive line guru here, but when your offensive lineman isn't keeping his shoulders square and punching out and turning his body and allowing the defender to get by, that's a huge technique error. That's what I'm more.
That's leverage. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm more concerned about some of the technique stuff I saw. Were they not ready for his explosiveness off the line of scrimmage? Did the wet field play a part of this? I don't know. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm looking for answers on how they can fix some of these technique issues before they play Texas A&M. So I don't look at their performance any differently, but I think it allows me to give more respect and credit to Ruben Bain in Miami.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I just included this because of all these Miami fans that we've had watching the show this week who are offended that we haven't said enough good things about their team, which, like, I don't understand. Your team won the game. Why is Notre Dame still so deep in your head after the fact? Do you really need that much validation after the fact? You know, Bain's a good player. He's not Abdul Carter, who Emil Wagner played better against in the college football playoff semifinals last year in the Orange Bowl. Same field, ironically enough. But Bain was a top 70 guy out of high school. He had 7.5 sacks as a true freshman a couple of years ago and was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. And then he was hurt last year and he wasn't able to contribute as much. But, I mean, again, trust me, Notre Dame knew what they were getting into based on some of the offensive game plan that they had in terms of the pressure that they felt like Bain could get on CJ Carr. You know, but look, he's a legit disruptor. So it doesn't change how I look at Notre Dame's offensive line's performance. But as Lou Holtz used to say, those guys get scholarships too, you know? So like most of our analysis is going to focus on what Notre Dame does or doesn't do, but you do have to take the other team into consideration as well. Give him his props, tip your hat, whatever. He had a great week, and I'm sure he's going to do some other good things this year, but it doesn't change how I look at Notre Dame's performance because of what you talked about. There are like specific technique things that if they were better, then maybe Bain doesn't have quite as big a game as what he had, but he played very well, and I'm not taking anything away from him. Going back to the fumbling ball security thing, Scott L. Esquire says, Vince is just wrong on this. The first 3 runs by Price were pedestrian on that drive. Notre Dame never let Love run it 3 plays in a row, let alone 5 plays in a row, like Price did on that drive. I agree with that. Like if they had just committed more to Jeremiah Love, I think he could have been just as big, if not a bigger factor than what Jadarian Price was in the running game. But they never fully committed to Jeremiah Love for whatever reason. They were more content to let him be a decoy for a good chunk of the night, which seems very odd considering who he is and the talent that he has.
Love the 2-back sets, by the way.
Yeah, me too. It's like,
and that was exactly what was kind of needed. The thing was that it felt like every 2-back set was a pass play. Just run the ball out of 2-back sets.
Yeah. Yep. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame men's and women's basketball are going to have an outdoor practice called Irish Jam to kick off their practices for the upcoming season on Eddy Street, like literally outdoors on Eddy Street in Eddy Street Commons, October 3rd.
I think it's beyond exciting, to be honest with you. Notre Dame is basically doing, its own like NBA, WNBA All-Star weekend, but it's a kickoff weekend to kind of, bring in the excitement for the basketball team, showcase the upcoming talent. You're doing it out in Eddy Street, which I think is really cool, like the whole outdoor aspect. And then, of course, it's the night before the game against Boise State. So, there's going to be a lot of fans in town. There's going to be a lot of people, here and there. Obviously, you and I won't be in town that weekend, unfortunately. But, I just think it's a really smart move. And we know that, the women's basketball team underachieved last year. We know the men's basketball team has been underachieving for 3-4 seasons now. And I think that there is obviously some pressure to bring some excitement back. Obviously, more so to men's basketball. Women's basketball is what they are. They're obviously, have probably more sellout arenas and bring in more fans. I think this is more so directed at the men's team. And again, getting the fans excited about coming out and supporting their teams this upcoming season.
Yeah, this is a pretty cool, unique thing. Under Armour's sponsoring it, to get like they're going to be out there with the court set up in the middle of the street out there in Eddy Street Commons, and they're fans are going to be able to go out there, and what they're going to do is they're going to have fans vote for a men's captain and a women's captain, and then they're going to pick co-ed teams, and then they're going to do this all-star challenge kind of thing. There's going to be a 3-point contest, a skills challenge, and a shooting challenge as well. So I think it's going to be really fun, like for them to be intermingling like that, doing something like that. As you said, it's a home football weekend, so you're going to have a big crowd around and you can kind of expose everybody to the team and stuff like that. So it's the first time they've done something like this. I think it's going to be pretty cool. So Lou Holtz, not done with Ryan Day and Ohio State. Here's what Lou Holtz said to Dan Dakich on Dakich's podcast. Quote, "You remember me telling you I don't think Ohio State is a great football team? I know the schedule is very, very good, but when you're at home and you're outgained by well over 100 yards, you just can't look at it and say, okay, we're great. We won the game. They're 1-0, and that's the objective they had going into that game. But they're not a great football team. I would not be overwhelmed about facing Ohio State." That, again, is from Lou Holtz. Fair or foul, Jesse?
So, call me crazy. I think there's some fairness to this, but it is overall foul. Ohio State is still one of the top teams in the country. Here's what I'll say, though. I am not as scared as I was of them last year as I am this year. My opinion, I don't think their offense is nearly is maybe relative, but their offense is not going to be as good as it was last season. But we saw how good their defense is going to be. And so I am, a Matt Patricia-led defense with Caleb Downs and some of those really good players. I do think that's a little bit scary. But that's not the backbone of most Ohio State teams. Most Ohio State teams are going to beat you with their offense. They're going to air the ball out, and they're going to have really good running backs and wide receivers. Yes, they still have one of the best wide receivers in the country, but I don't think their offensive unit is as impressive as it has been in the last 5 to 10 years. So, and really, I think that's across the board for all of college football. I think this is a really interesting year for college football because a lot of these top dogs have a lot of turnover at the quarterback position. And I think there's going to be some growing pains for a lot of these a lot of these traditional powerhouse programs that are now having to resort to, first-time quarterbacks at the end of the day. And so to wrap this all up, I'm not as scared as Ohio State offensively, but as a team, they're still really great and have established themselves as being one of the best teams in college football.
Yeah, and I just got to go foul for Lou Holtz. Look, why do you keep slinging it at Ryan Day and Ohio State? Obviously, the first thing came up before the Notre Dame game at Notre Dame Stadium a couple of years ago. That backfired. They played again in the national championship game last year. Notre Dame came close, but no cigar there. Why does Lou have to keep taking the shots at Ryan Day? I think what's the funniest thing, I haven't heard a response from Ryan Day, but I think what's been the funniest in the past is the fact that Ryan Day thinks he has to respond to Lou Holtz. I think that's maybe why Lou is doing this, just to kind of get under Ryan Day's skin a little bit, get under
just to let him know he's still there.
Yeah, it's I'm still here. I'm still Lou Holtz, and I'm going to keep coming at you no matter what, no matter how old I get. Because the whole, you're outgained by 100. Well, they won the game. That's all that matters. They won the game. And you had Arch Manning, who's maybe the most, at this point, he's definitely overhyped, at least coming into the season, the most overhyped quarterback in college football based on all the expectations that everyone seemed to have from him. And in the meantime, Julian Sayin and Ohio State just won the game. And as you said, they did it largely because of their defense, So I don't understand why Lou is taking the shots. It's good entertainment, though, when you hear this stuff. So I've got no problem with it. Just keep it coming, providing us stuff to talk about.
So couple things. First, I saw that Lou Holtz personally wrote Ryan Day a congratulatory letter on winning the national championship, but then proceeded to say Day never wrote back or reached out and
he had to
accepted or acknowledged or any of that. So I don't know if that plays into this. And then number two, we kind of keep coming back to this, Ohio State offense and everything. I wish we could just let the Arch Manning thing go. He played a really good defense on the road in one of his probably unofficial first starts, right? just why don't we wait until the season is over before we say he's not a 5-star quarterback, he's overhyped. Like, the man played, it's just like Notre Dame. The man played against the number one team in the country on the road to open up the season. Like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. Like, can we not overreact? Can we wait until maybe we see him play, I don't know, maybe one of the best defenses in the country, led by a guy who won a lot of Super Bowls with the Patriots because of how good of a defensive coordinator he is? Like, let's just chill a little bit. I want to see a full season before we say anything negative or positive about Arch Manning.
Well, then you're not allowed to be on this show. You've got to say stuff week to week. You know how it goes. You can't wait the entire season to say anything. I get your point, though. Bobby O'Shea says, show notes. Jesse likes Rudolph, Ohio State, and getting married during Notre Dame games.
I am not out in doomsday on Rudolph like a lot of people is. Yes, there's things that he needs to clean up and fix as a coach, but I have confidence that he will. Ohio State just won a national championship, so yes, I'm going to be high on them. And I didn't know that this getting married during a Notre Dame game was still a thing. Like, this is still a problem for a lot of people.
It's going to be a bigger thing. We're under a month. It's going to become a bigger thing. It's not going away anytime soon. I think you're going to hear more about it rather than less of it. So Cal Raleigh is the first catcher in Major League Baseball history to hit 50 home runs in a season. He's at 51 right now. He's on pace for more than 60 this season. Do you buy or sell they should cut into a college football game if he comes to bat with a chance to hit 60 while a game is going on?
Yeah, as long as it's not my Notre Dame game, I'm all okay with them cutting it. And seriously, I'm cool with this, whether it's Cal Raleigh setting a record for catchers or hitting a new milestone like 60 home runs. If anyone is chasing Barry Bonds' record at some point, I would like them to cut into it so I can see it. I didn't mind when they did it with Aaron Judge, I think a couple years ago, cutting into the games. Like, it's monumental moments. And an at-bat lasts probably on average 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I can stand, the split screen for 2 to 3 minutes and seeing that at-bat to potentially set some sort of record.
This is where you and I are going to have to differ, because the reason I came up with this is because of the Aaron Judge thing a couple of years ago, and I thought it was ridiculous. Like, this is not 1975 when we had 3 channels and, the only live information that you got was either on your radio or by watching ABC.
So you're saying as a grown man, Saturday, you can make a decision on whether or not you want to watch the baseball game or the football game.
And by the way, there's MLB Network and there's Twitter and there's Instagram and, there's every social media platform out there. A college football viewer does not need their college football viewing experience cut into for something that's going on in a completely different sport. We don't need that. So no. We don't need a repeat of Aaron Judge. It does not need to happen. It should not happen.
Case closed.
All right. By the way, Bernie says Lou hates Ohio State as much as he does.
I mean, Ohio, trust me, I hate Ohio State, but I'm willing to give them praise as deserved.
We had our fantasy football draft last night. Jesse is our fantasy commissioner, and he likes to wait until the very last minute to do the drafts. We always do it the day before the first game.
So can I explain myself here?
I understand your rationale to make sure there's no injuries or anything.
No injuries. Maybe guys are traded. You have more official depth charts because we're literally a day or two before games. I like having the most up-to-date information as possible.
I got you. Well, my question doesn't revolve around that, but a lot of leagues do punishments for finishing in last place. Like most leagues, you win the thing, you're going to get some kind of reward, whether it's money or whatever else. Some leagues do punishments for finishing in last, which I think is actually a pretty good idea, even though it might be the same person every year based on the way our league has gone. But there was a guy a couple of years ago who had to eat in a Waffle House for 24 hours. Like he had like every hour of the 24, I think he had to eat something while he was in there. Another one I just heard recently, someone had to drink 2 cans of cold soup as their punishment for losing their fantasy football. What do you think about that one? Like, do you have a like what would a good punishment for finishing last in your fantasy league be?
So I think the eating 2 cans of soup is too easy. I mean, really, it's not even undesirable. It's just cold soup. Like you could get through it. It's still probably going to taste good, or not taste good, but not taste like poop or something, you know. But to add on to it, I've seen a couple funny ones myself. I saw the one the other day that the loser had to take the winner's parents out to dinner. I thought that was pretty good.
That's a pretty good one.
One of my buddies in a league that they did, their punishment was the last place person had to do a firefighter-esque calendar shoot. Basically come up with their own calendar, like some of those, firefighter ones that have gone around. I'm in a good amount of leagues. None of us have a last place punishment. I'm all for it. I think there should be a penalty for being a loser and being the worst loser. One that has been discussed in my group of friends is we're all predominantly from Ohio. You have to drive the entire state, like basically like around the border of the state.
That's not bad.
Hasn't gone through.
They don't really make highways that like trace the outline of your state, though. You'd be all over the place trying to do that.
Yeah, you'd have to get creative of creating your route, that sort of situation.
I kind of like here's the one I would like as an adult. Assuming you're adults playing fantasy football, as an adult, like you go to Walmart or wherever they do the glamour shots these days, and you have to dress in your best Poindexter outfit, and you have to get like the cheesiest glamour shot photos that you could come up with, and you have to post them on all of your social media platforms.
I love that. I think it should be your profile picture for at least a week.
There you go, if not a year.
So I think where this what the fine line with this one is I think the punishment has to be bearable. It can't be this extraordinarily, nasty, egregious type punishment. It has to be doable. And again, it can't just be this, like basically worst thing in the world, right? Like you kind of have to incentivize it being somewhat fun at the end of the day, or maybe comedic at the end of the day. But when you I don't know, start forcing people into doing like gross things or harmful things, then yeah, I think it gets a little bit too extreme. But yeah. I definitely think there is some good fun in having some sort of punishment for a last place finish.
ND Forever 72. I haven't seen this article. It said Vegas odds if Kalen DeBoer was let go this year. He says Reese has the number 1 odds at plus 300 to get the job.
That's a tough one. I've always said that Reese, I think, wants to be in the NFL. I think he thinks he belongs in the NFL. Sure. Obviously, there's track record of being at Bama. He's obviously a really good, mind. I don't know. I just see him following more of the Kellen Moore trajectory, being an NFL OC, eventually getting a shot as an NFL head coach. I think now that he's in the NFL waters, I don't think he wants to go back to college necessarily this quickly.
And I think if you're Alabama, going from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer is one thing, because at least DeBoer has head coaching experience at the Power 4 level, coached his team.
That's true.
That's the national championship game. Reese is not even a head coach. So I
don't think the boosters would go for that one.
Yeah, I think.
Especially if they have to buy out DeBoer.
Right. That just puts you back in that cycle of, a couple of, well, maybe not quite 2 decades, but a decade and a half of all these coaches that you went through, Shula and, all these different guys before you ended up with Nick Saban to begin with. But it's like I said, like everyone who assumed that Alabama was going to keep winning. I said this, I don't know how many times. People thought that Alabama was just going to keep winning because they're Alabama. But look at what happened at Alabama prior to Nick Saban arriving there. They went through a lot of coaches. They had a lot of bad records at Alabama before they got there. It's not like you just show up at Alabama and you win. There was Nick Saban's Alabama. There was Bear Bryant's Alabama. Maybe you can say Gene Stallings because he obviously won a national championship that didn't quite last, as long as either Saban or Bear Bryant. But it's not a place where just your run-of-the-mill head coach has had a lot of success just showing up there.
Where does Gruden fall on this list for you?
I agree with what Swandong says. Lane Kiffin, much more likely. I don't think Gruden gets it. I don't think they'd bring in a pro coach who's been out of coaching for a few years, especially in today's college football atmosphere.
I do agree that Kiffin would be way more likely. Been in the SEC, wants to be a college head coach.
Has an OC at Alabama.
Exactly. Has spent a good amount of time at Alabama. He was under the Saban regime. Obviously, they want to get back to the Saban regime if they do let go of DeBoer. So
he said Kiffin was number 3, had the third best odds on the list. Tommy Rees seems odd to me just because he was there for a year. Bobby O'Shea, by the way, on the fantasy football punishment says, best punishment, have to attend a wedding during your football game. See, I told you they're not going to let it go. Indy Forever 72 asks if I'm missing Notre Dame football to go to my son's wedding. I don't know. I'm kind of starting to have second thoughts. I might stay here. I might just, I want to see those guys in blue and orange. I don't know.
Priorities, am I right?
That's right. It's a hard decision at this point.
So I need to know before we get out of here, and I know this is going to make a lot of people excited, but give me your honest expectations of what happens this evening.
I really wish I had a good feel. I don't think it's as dire as everyone's making it out to be. What happens after getting Clark from Green Bay? What if they stop the tush push just once tonight? What if Jalen Hurts is trying to score and they can't get in because they've got a big dog in the middle of the defensive line?
What if Kenny Clark stuffs it up the middle, and then Maris Leofeld jumps over top on Jalen Hurts?
Yeah. I've just got a feeling I like getting those 8.5 points because again, was Micah Parsons going to make that much difference against Jalen Hurts, a guy who is a better runner than a passer?
Right.
I mean, sure, you need a pass rush, but Matt Eberflus is, they brought Eberflus back in to be defensive coordinator. He's traditionally, when he was defensive coordinator, schemed it up pretty good against the run. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive than most people are saying it's going to be. They've got a healthy Dak Prescott. They've got CeeDee Lamb. They've got George Pickens. 2 of those 3 things they didn't have last year for most of the year.
I agree. Here's where I'm at. I think they win by 3 or lose by 7. I think 8.5 is really egregious, like you were saying. This was really just for me to segue into my best bet of the evening. I took Cowboys at an alternate spread of 14.5. And there was a touchdown prop for either CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens to score. I parlayed those 2 things plus 130 odds. You're giving me 14.5 points, and we know that Dallas is going to have to throw the ball. So I get either CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens to score. Parlay those 2 things plus 130. I took it easy. I took that with no hesitations.
Bobby O'Shea says 34-13.
Just not going to happen.
Eagles. I will tell you this, Bobby, when we come in and do the show tomorrow. I don't know if you're a wing fan, whatever. If you're a wing fan, I'll buy you 2 dozen wings from whatever your favorite wing spot is. If the Cowboys lose to the Eagles by 3 touchdowns tonight,
I'll double down and match your order.
Okay. So Bobby's got 4 dozen wings coming his way. If
they lose by 3 touchdowns.
If they lose by 3 touchdowns. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Sounds like a plan. Man, it's weird. Like I almost ran out of breath on this show after all the commercial breaks that we've had. We've just talked for 90 minutes solid, just like the good old days on the podcast with no commercial breaks on tonight's show. We'll be back on Sports Radio WSBT tomorrow, though. Brian Driscoll's going to join in the show tomorrow. We're going to talk. We're going to have a little Notre Dame football recruiting segment, and also from Notre Dame women's basketball, freshman Leah Macy. She's going to join me. We're going to talk about how her knee recovery is going, kind of how things are going for her, getting into her freshman year and all that kind of stuff. And then Jesse will be jumping back in at the end of the show for rapid fire. Joe, you're too late, and I don't like people from Wichita, so don't try to piggyback on this going 41-3. You're not getting any wings. I don't care what anybody else says. So, all right, that's going to do it for tonight. Have a great night. Great questions earlier. We will talk to you tomorrow on Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.